Excuse me. Could I get your attention for just a moment? If we could get everyone to perform the courtesy of checking to make sure that your cell phones are off, please. And nudge your neighbor and remind them. But if we could make sure that all cell phones are off or silenced, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. One more very friendly reminder to silence or turn off your cell phones. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We come together today to mourn the loss of Ruth Scheuer, devoted wife to Walter, Zichrono Livracha, mothers to Stephen, Annette, and Daniel, sister to Ernst and Ilsa, Zichronam Livracha, grandmother to Adam, Benjamin, Blair, Evan, Julie, Lindsay, and Robert. Great-grandmother to Max, James, Gavin, and Asher. Aunt to Diana, Zichrona Livracha, and Sharon. Great-aunt to Miriam, Aaron, Aviva, Daniel, and Rachel. And of course, a friend to so many of us here today. We come together today to share our grief and sadness at her death, and to support Ruth's family and each other during this time of darkness. God, we pray to you today that her family may find comfort in those that are present, both here and virtually, and you provide them with the strength to honor Ruth's memory. Blessed are you, Adonai, who comforts those in mourning and enables us to provide comfort. Together let us say, Amen. In the words of the book of Kohelet and the book of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. This time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service today with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Ruth's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I'd like to invite Cantor Jessica Roskin to come up to lead Shaviti Hashem from the book of Psalms. In the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan states that our father Jacob is not dead. His counterpart, Rabbi Nachman, countered, "Was it for nothing that Jacob was mourned, prepared for eternal rest, and then buried?" Rabbi Yochanan replied, "As Jacob's children are alive, so too is Jacob alive." We'll continue with the final lines from Adon Olam, Bi'ado afkidu ruchi, in God's hand does our soul rest.
Bi'ado afkidu ruchi, be'eit ishan ve'aira, ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li ve'lo ira, ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li ve'lo ira. My soul I give to you, my spirit in your care. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Safely in your hands. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Safely in your hands.
And we'll continue with Psalm 23, the comforting words of the Psalms at times of distress.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar. Binot deshe arbitzeini, al mei menuchot yenahaleini. Nafshi eshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki heilech begeit al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai. Dishanta vashem en roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim.
Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. Giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit. Guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. This time, I'd like to invite Anne Mullengarden to come up to share a few words. For those who don't know, Anne co-authored the book, the memoir of Ruth's life, and would like to share a few words in her memory this afternoon.
Ruth came into my life in 2009. I was the education director of the Alabama Holocaust Education Center, and she had shared her testimony with Becky Seitel and Mitzi Levin for their upcoming Darkness into Life exhibit. And it was shortly thereafter that we began working together on her memoir, My Father's Blessing. Ruth had reached a point in her life in which it was too emotionally difficult to continue to tell her story. She felt that if she just put it all in a book, it would be done, so to speak. Then they would just have to look in the book, she said. And so we worked and we remembered together. Each session, she would recall her past. She would reopen old traumas that tormented her for days. And when a new memory would spring forth, she would always say, "Can you imagine?" As if even she could still not believe that this had happened to her. Little did she realize the impact that her story and this little book would have. When Ruth's memoir came out, she relished the attention and love that she received. She was revitalized to speak in schools, and students and teachers found a very personal connection in her story of lost youth. Her newfound willingness to be a spokesperson for those not able to bear witness helped to shape the Alabama Holocaust Education Center. And Ruth's story even became the focus of our 2018 teacher workshop. And when Ruth turned 90, her children honored her special birthday by establishing the Siegler Fellowship that would provide college or graduate students the opportunity to research Holocaust survivor-related topics. But Ruth was much more than just a Holocaust survivor. Ruth had learned the lesson of loss at an early age and so held her family very close to her heart. Nothing was more important than being with family and celebrating life. She loved her children. She loved her grandchildren. She loved her great-grandchildren more than life itself. And Ruth loved her friends, her Birmingham family. She made friends everywhere she went, whether it was friends from her childhood in Germany, friends that could share stories about her beloved Holland, friends that she met at Penny Palmer, or friends that bought shoes from her at Gus Meyer, friends who she prayed with at Temple Bethel, and friends from Brookdale who helped her through some very difficult times. Ruth was the kind of friend that always called you if she hadn't heard from you, who wouldn't let you leave her house without a treat, who wanted to know everything about your family and actually remembered it. These lifelong friends remained loyal to Ruth until the very end and were blessed by having her in their lives. Ruth used to say that she was lucky in the little things, but not so much in the big things. Who here today didn't experience Ruth's uncanny luck in finding a parking spot directly in front of your final destination? Can you imagine, she would say. But Ruth's life threw her many curveballs. With her husband's untimely death, she was forced to raise 3 children on her own and to work outside the home at a time when this was not the norm. Her daughter Annette's early onset dementia was a particularly difficult blow, softened only by the loving care she continues to receive from her devoted husband, Joel. Learn to suffer without complaining. Those words passed on by her father were Ruth's guiding light, and she felt her father's love always, right here. And with that gift, Ruth was able to maintain a glass-half-full attitude until the very end. But when Ruth's sister Ilsa passed away, it was more than she could handle. They had been inextricably bound by their Holocaust traumas and always there for each other. Ruth passed away only 10 days after her sister Ilsa. Can you imagine?
Next, we'd like to invite up Milton Hermann, Ruth's cousin's son, to share a few memories and words with us.
It's actually Milton Hermann. My daughter actually married a Hermann, so she is Joanna Hermann. I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief, which for those of you who know me is difficult in and of itself, but also who know about my feelings about Ruth will be difficult. My mother was Ruth's cousin. These were German people, and so I'll say that Ruth was geborene Scheuer. My mother was geborene Daniel, and her mother was a Scheuer. And her uncle Jacob was one of her favorites, if not her favorite. That's Ruth's father. They all lived in small towns in Germany with small Jewish congregations. I shouldn't say congregations, small numbers of families. Some of the larger towns had a synagogue. They would meet in someone's house and have services. And these were towns like Cincinich and like Dover, where my mother was from. There are representatives here among the family from Kaisersesch and from Gerolstein and other places, and all suffered great loss in the families. Ruth in particular, with her brother and her parents, and virtually all, except for one set of her aunts and uncles. Steve and I were talking about this last night, that they didn't talk about the loss. When they were talking about someone, they'd say, they didn't get out. And that was enough. Ruth and Ilsa got out, and so they're a tie for us to the lives that were lost and the culture that was lost. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about what happened after they got out. I reread Ruth's book in order to familiarize myself with some events, and I hadn't realized that Ruth and Ilsa had come to Omaha first thing when they came to the States. But they were back in Brooklyn working, but there was an urgent need for her to come to Omaha in late November of 1948 because my mother, who had 4 children already, was about to have a 5th, me. And Ruth came to take care of my older siblings, and shockingly after that decided to have kids of her own. But that was when she came and was introduced to Walter Siegler. So we have a tie. There was a tie there that was both unbreakable, as were all of our feelings for Ruth. Ruth, we talk often about mishpacha, and that's a Yiddish word. We didn't do much Yiddish in our families. Ruth was mishpacha, was truly an innate member of our family. And the way she lived her life and her positive outlook and her perspective on the world, and as I read her book and as I heard Ms. Mullengard reflect on, can you believe it? You know, she saw I would say the glass more than half empty. So we think about her, and the rabbi used a phrase which is used to talk about people who we have lost, zichrono or zichrona livracha. May their memory be for a blessing. It really is for a blessing, not just a blessing, for a blessing. And you've probably heard this if you listen to CNN from Wolf Blitzer and Jake Tapper when they're speaking about people. And it says something very important. When we talk about the Holocaust, there's a phrase, never forget. Forgetting is a passive process. Memory is active, and Ruth, we say Zichronah Livracha, she is and always will be an active part of our lives and of our memory. Thank you.
Two of Ruth's grandsons, Adam and Evan Levy, were not able to come today. They're sons of Annette. But they did write a few words that their cousin Ben Siegler is going to share with us at this time. So I'd like to invite, or Blair, to come up.
Can't get the other. Hi. Actually. And then I'd like to share a few words of my own. This is from Evan and Adam. Our Oma has been a fixture and inspiration in our lives since we were born. And from an early age, we knew that our Oma's life story was an inspiration to other people. When she was visiting us in Sacramento one time, Oma spoke to Evan's fourth grade classmates and parents about her experiences as a child in Germany. And even as recently as a few weeks ago, Evan's teacher, who is herself retired now, remarked at a completely unrelated event about what an impression that day made on her. While we realized that Oma was special because of her personal history, she was special to us as simply our wonderful grandmother. Whether it was sending us whiskey cake care packages at college, hosting perfect family events for our bar mitzvahs and weddings, or making so many cross-country trips on her own just to see us, our Oma's love always seemed boundless. One of our best memories was coming to Birmingham 5 years ago with the entire family for Oma's 90th birthday. Oma was always putting everyone else first, especially her grandchildren. So it was great to be able to make her the center of attention and celebrate her on her special birthday. While we strive to be as strong and thoughtful as our Oma to honor her memory and to always stay connected to our family because family meant everything to Oma, we will always love and miss you, Oma. What I would like to say is, I think Oma's greatest fulfillment was obviously having 7 grandchildren, but more than that, having them be spitting images of the kids that she produced. And with that, if I had to say anything to Oma right now, it's thank you for giving me the best father, the best uncle, and the best aunt that I could ever have. Wouldn't change it.
Now I'd like to invite her other grandchildren, Julie, Lindsay, Robert, and coming up to share a few words in memory of their grandmother.
Oma often said that we, her children and grandchildren, were her great reward. When she would visit Tenafly, Oma would always travel with 2 suitcases, one with her clothes, the other with more precious cargo. An extra crusty potato kugel for my dad, the world's densest matzo balls for my mom, homemade applesauce and braised red cabbage for Lindsay, a Linzer tort for Julie, a chocolate whiskey cake, and Hopcha's coffee candies for me. Someone please warn the company that makes Hopcha's to cut back on production now, as she was surely single-handedly keeping them in business. On the last morning of her trips, we would go to Celebrity Bagels to fill her now empty suitcase with 24 bagels. She's the only person I ever met who actually ordered pumpernickel. All for her to distribute to friends upon her return. What I learned later on when I would fly down to visit her with bagels in tow was that it wasn't about the bagels. As we drove from house to house to distribute 3 to Ava, 3 to Ilsa, 3 to any number of other friends, I came to learn that the bagels were an excuse to show us off and brag about our latest accomplishments. The price of a few imported New Jersey bagels was a 10-minute story about Lindsay's fashion show, Julie's friendships, or my hockey games. She could turn any minor achievement into the most monumental, with stories punctuated with one of her favorite sayings, "Can you believe it?" One Rosh Hashanah, while I was studying at Vanderbilt, the Jewish calendar The Jewish calendar didn't allow for a trip home to New Jersey. So Oma eagerly opened her home to me and 3 of my good friends from school. For weeks leading up to the trip, she would call me to discuss the menu and her plans for the post-temple 2 p.m. dinner, as she called it. There was no editing of the menu, just constant additions. What's the difference? Halfway through Temple Bethel services, our good friend Alex Kimmerling and his family invited us to stop by their Rosh Hashanah brunch at their home, while Oma stayed for the end of services. On the way out of this sanctuary, Oma reminded me that dinner would be right after temple ended and made me promise that we wouldn't eat beforehand. The only time I ever looked her in the eyes and lied to her. We headed back to the Kimberling's home with Alex, but on the way got word that we'd be early. So being 4 college boys from the Northeast, we immediately recognized our opportunity for the South's greatest delicacy and looked up the nearest Chick-fil-A. As we stepped up to the counter, I told the group that eating at Oma's was non-negotiable, so order wisely. Having finished our full trays of sandwiches, nuggets, fries, and milkshakes, Alex's dad David called to tell us that guests had started to arrive and we should come back. There we quickly found ourselves eyes wide with plates in hand, staring at a bountiful spread. I offered my same warning to the group: eat what you like, but eating at Oma's is non-negotiable. After filled plates were emptied, Oma called us to tell us that she, Ilsa, and 2 friends were home from temple, and dinner would be in 30 minutes. As the 4 women sat across from us, eager for feedback on the spread, we put on our brave faces and filled, then emptied our plates once more. Well past the point of being overstuffed, we ate while the grinning women offered us helping after helping of brisket, chicken, potato kugel, noodle kugel, braised red cabbage, cucumber salad, apple cake, whiskey cake, and every other delicacy that Oma had perfected over the years. We were on a mission to ensure her expectations were met, and the food-induced comas we fell into afterwards marked our achievement. One of Oma's Omahisms that I hold dear is show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. She was using that dinner to get to know my closest friends and ultimately me better. I still cherish that some of my best friends got to experience Oma and she them. God, I can't see now. For years after, she would ask about Tim, Evan, and Andrew, and always include how nice they were, her highest honor. About a week ago, Mary Kimberly showed Oma a picture of all of us with her from that trip. And without skipping a beat, she said, "We couldn't fill those boys up. They ate everything at your house before eating everything at my house." Mission accomplished.
Being the oldest grandchild, I always felt like I had a special bond with Oma. Some may call that being the favorite. Every time I was with her, I would pull on her gullet and make her tell me that I was her favorite. She would give me that sly smile and say, "Of course you are, but don't tell the others." I'm sure she did that. I'm sure that what she was doing with every grandchild. But that's what she did to make us all feel special. Oma made every person she interacted with feel like they were her favorite. Once I had my sons, Gavin and Asher, I knew I had taken the crown permanently, but can you blame her? Oma loved to visit. Whenever we would come to Birmingham or she would come to New Jersey, there would be a moment where she would corner you and say, "Come visit with me." That was the cue to drop whatever you were doing and prepare to be interrogated on everything going on in your life. As a kid, it was a frustrating request to stop whatever fun thing you were in the middle of. But as I got older, I would come to appreciate sharing the bigger things, updates with college, jobs, relationships. Once my now husband Paul and I started dating seriously, we made the trip to Alabama for him to face the ultimate test. On the first afternoon, she kicked me out of the visit so she could get to know Paul without my protection. Once he was released 30 minutes later, with a smirk on each of their faces, I knew he had passed. That approval meant the world to me. When Paul and I had our first son, Gavin, we brought him down to see all the places that we had gone with her as a kid. And our second son, Asher, was able to have his own visit with her when we all came down to celebrate her 95th birthday this past April. Trips that helped them form the basis of their frequent FaceTime visits. We giggle a little when a visit comes up, but really it was the importance of being together that mattered to her, and it's a gift that she brought us all together to enjoy each other's company. A few days ago when I was in the car with Gavin and we were discussing the members of his extended family, we got to grandparents, and he said, "I have 2 grandpas and 3 grandmas." I corrected him that he only had 2 grandmas, Cece and Grammy. And he barked back at me, "Well, Oma's my grandma too." As I tried to explain the concept of great-grandma while driving with tears welling up in my eyes, I realized that how much of an impression she had made on his life in such a short time. I am so lucky that my sons have been able to spend enough time with their Oma to not only consider her their grandma, but to have the memories of their own to remember her by.
As we've heard before, Oma would claim credit for every good parking spot ever gotten, but the reality was, when you went somewhere with her, you always did get a great parking spot. She never got off an airplane without making a new friend. Nobody was a stranger. She never lost her playful mischievousness. Nobody laughed harder when we snuck a whoopee cushion under her chair at a 20-person Passover Seder. She single-handedly kept full moon barbecue in business, as my now fiancé Ben experienced on his visit 2 years ago. And receiving a phone call from Oma meant that you'd need to budget your time wisely. If you have 20 minutes to talk, better start wrapping up 10 minutes in, because there was always just one more thing to say before the actual goodbye. Oma was the ultimate perspective setter. She expertly balanced optimism and perseverance despite experiencing some of the worst life can have to offer. Her ability to stay level-headed and hopeful in spite of all of that gave us all the responsibility to strive for the same. A bad day at school was a day spent learning. A rough business meeting was still a day being challenged on our ideas in the comfort of a conference room. Despite the battle confronting us in any given moment, Sieglers had experienced and survived worse before, lending the charge needed to believe we could do it again and overcome whatever comparatively minor challenge faced us. It goes without saying that anyone who knew Oma knew how much of a boss that she really was. She was a force to be reckoned with as the matriarch of this strong-willed family. Even though she had endured so much tragedy, she still approached life with gratitude and devotion to her family, friends, and community. She was firm but generous, strict but caring, a great listener, but she would tell you her opinion, especially when you didn't want to hear it. She gave a great hug, but she could set you straight with one glance of her expressive eyes when you deserved it. She was tough, but only as tough as was necessary because she knew what we were capable of. She always held each of us to account based on our personal potential and expected us to work hard to reach it. There's only one Oma, and we feel very fortunate to have had her in our lives as a grandma and a role model for as long as we have. We'll miss her dearly, and may her memory be a blessing.
Now I'd like to invite Ruth's friend, Cantor Jessica Roskin, to come up to share a few words.
Most of us live our lives day to day with a sense of routine. There are moments in time that are highlights, and there are also difficult experiences, some so painful that we ever wonder how we will be able to move through them. Those difficulties often leave a lasting imprint that somehow changes our perspective on life. Sometimes it comes to define us. It forever changes who we are, at times for the better, but frequently for the worse. But the woman we are all here to honor today has been through far more than any of us can begin to imagine. It is likely we have all heard Ruth's story or read her book, but that doesn't begin to allow us to comprehend the horrors she and her sister Ilse endured during the Holocaust. Did the murder of their parents and brother when they were young change them? Did moving from one concentration camp to another leave a lasting mark on them? We can all agree the answers are a definite yes, but it takes a strong will and a strength of character to survive such atrocities, and that is the Ruth Scheuer we know and remember. Ruth took her experiences and utilized them to make a great life for herself. Now that she had moved to Birmingham, it was important to her to be and act like an American. She married Walter in 1949, and within a succession of 10 years, produced Stephen, Annette, and Dan. Again, tragedy struck. Walter died unexpectedly in 1968, and she was a young widow with 3 children to provide for. He was the love of her life. She never dated or married again. She could have given up. But not Ruth. Her children became her focus. She became the rock of her family, and she did so in a very charismatic way. She got a job working at Ilse's shop, Penny Palmer, and also worked at Gus Meyer. Ruth did her very best to make her children's lives as normal as possible. She taught her children to be independent. She spoiled them with love, but not material possessions. Somehow, Ruth's children knew, while they could not afford all of the things their friends had, what they had was enough. Whatever they needed, she provided. She insisted they all attend college, and they attribute their successful lives to her. While helping to make good lives for her children, she also made a good life for herself. Ruth was always kind and pleasant with her children's friends. When Stephen, Annetta, and Danny were growing up, she was loved by their friends. She engaged them in conversation. She was interested in what they were up to, both good and bad. She was accepting of them all, yet she would not hesitate to give her opinion. She spoiled them with food, always the good cook. Her relationship with her customers, her involvement at her beloved synagogue, her participation in the Alabama Holocaust Education Center, writing her book, and her positive and gracious manner brought her many friends of all ages. She spent quality time with them, attending concerts and the theater, and sharing her love of travel. She was passionate about people, and they in return were eager to be with her. I am honored to count myself among her many friends. Stephen and Danny have allowed me to tell the story of my connection to Ruth. I try not to do that, but I'm going to now. In 1993 to 94, I was a student cantor at Adathia Shuren in Manchester, New Hampshire. Coincidentally, Ilse's granddaughter became bat mitzvah there. That is how I met Ilse and Ruth, long before I arrived in Birmingham. While talking to them, I told them that they sounded like my Oma, my grandmother. But my Oma, when asked where she was from, would answer in her very German accent that she was from Holland because she survived the war there. Ruth asked for her last name. Together we determined that after the war, they lived in the same apartment complex as my mother's uncle, and they had lived in some of the same cities in Holland. Fast forward 5 years, and I moved to Birmingham. And there are Ilse and Ruth. They met and befriended my mother, conversing with her in Dutch. My mother, also a Holocaust survivor whose father was killed in a concentration camp, proved they had a lot in common. I am proud to say that Ruth told our story in her book and mentioned both my mother and myself. I have always adored my special connection with her. But here we are now, saying goodbye to our friend Ruth. She lived the very best life she could construct for herself. She had her friends, she had her children, and she had her sister. But when Ilse died, Ruth decided on her own that she had lived her life to its fullest, and it was time to go. She and her sister had been through everything together, and they needed to remain together. It is comforting to imagine their souls again intertwined, both with their Walters, smiling and content. That is the way I will choose to remember Ruth. Zichrona livracha, Ruth, your life has been for a blessing. Amen.
Most of the time, when we think of strength, our first thoughts often go to physical strength. We think of athletes, of bodybuilders, people lifting large, heavy objects. Even now, in 2022, we as a society are just beginning to shift our understanding of strength to refer to emotional strength as well, though our minds still naturally gravitate towards the former. Ben Zoma, a second-century rabbi of our tradition, challenges our understanding of what it means to be strong. Who is strong, he asks? One who conquers his or her own inclination. For Ben Zoma, strength had nothing to do with our physical abilities and didn't even have anything to do with overcoming emotional struggles. True strength is about resisting following your own self-interests in order to achieve a greater communal good. This teaching of Ben Zoma's came to mind as I spoke to Daniel and Stephen, Ruth's sons, about their mother. As they shared story after story of Ruth's life, it occurred to me that her willingness and ability to put aside her own inclinations was a thread that spanned throughout her life. It is a lesson I imagine she learned at a young age, as her family repeatedly chose staying together in Nazi Germany and Nazi-occupied Holland, rather than letting any member be deported or go to a camp alone. Indeed, it is likely that her relationship with her sister Ilse, Zichrona livracha, and their commitment to stay together kept both of them alive. As the two of them told their story, there was a point shortly before they were freed when the two sisters wanted to give up and end their own suffering. But they didn't, because they hoped to be reunited with surviving family. After moving to America and marrying her beloved husband Walter, Ruth sought to hide her pain by not discussing the Holocaust, wanting to become, as her children said, an average American housewife. But later, she realized that telling her story, sharing her pain, and teaching others about what she went through, even writing a book about it, could help ensure that the Holocaust would never be forgotten. The commitment and dedication that Ilse and Ruth demonstrated towards the Alabama Holocaust Education Center has been invaluable in its mission of not letting these horrors be repeated. After Walter died, as has been mentioned already, Ruth never remarried or even dated, putting aside her own personal needs to care for her children, a care that continued throughout their lives, including her daughter Annette's battle with dementia and Ruth's never-ending care and love for her, even after she couldn't talk anymore. At each of these various points, Ruth could have put her own needs first. She could have tried to protect herself at the cost of separating from her family. She and Ilse could have ended their own pain. They could have kept their stories to themselves and not relive it over and over again by telling their stories. She could have tried to be an average American housewife. She could have sought out her own needs for intimacy after she was widowed. But at each point, Ruth did not make the decisions based on her own self-interests. Repeatedly, Ruth chose to love her family, to love her friends, to love her community, and help out others. Her strength in doing so with her own naturally personable, friendly, positive attitude, caused her to be as well loved by all of us in this room. As we recall Ruth's life today, we also hope to learn from it. May the strength Ruth demonstrated, both emotionally and with all the challenges she faced, and spiritually in conquering her own inclinations, be an inspiration to all of us here and to all who knew her, causing us to try to equal the immense strength Ruth exemplified throughout her life. Zichrona livracha, may Ruth's memory and strength be a blessing and an inspiration for all of us. At this time, I'd like to invite her sons, Daniel and Steve, up, as well as Barry Katz, to come share a few final thoughts.
Okay. Hello, I'm Barry Katz. I grew up with Ruth's daughter Annette and remained very close friends with her and her husband Joel. I knew and loved Ruth for nearly my entire life. Joel has asked me to share some words of his with you today as he could not be here in person. I have countless memories of my mother-in-law Ruth, including weddings, bar and bat mitzvahs, special birthdays, wonderful trips, and much more. Even though we shared so much over the years, I would like to mention something that happened just the other evening after Ruth passed away. I got a call from Monique, whose husband, Mark Hermann, sadly died of cancer while only in his 40s, a little over 3 years ago. Monique said she had just heard that Ruth passed away, and she was calling to offer her condolences. She also wanted me to tell how much a brief visit Ruth and I made to see Mark not long before he died in 2019 had meant to them. It was on the last trip Ruth made to California, and she knew that Mark did not have much longer. She told me what a nice man he was and that she would very much like to go see him in San Francisco if possible. I did not know Mark, but it was obviously important to Ruth, so we drove to San Francisco for what turned out to be a short visit because Mark had very little stamina left at that point. Ruth and Mark chatted warmly about family and good memories. We met their adorable girls, and then we left for the long drive back to Sacramento. I believe Mark passed away not long after that visit, but the unexpected call I received from Monique the other day reminded me what I love most about Ruth. It was the little things she did for friends and family that truly defined her. A few kind words, something she had lovingly baked or crocheted for one of us, or just an offer to sit and share some favorite memories. Over the last several months, as Annette has been unable to speak, we would call every evening so Ruth could say goodnight, and all she wanted to know was if Annette had smiled during their talk, which did happen often. A small thing perhaps, but as meaningful to Ruth as winning the lottery. In Hebrew, Ruth means compassionate friend, and I cannot think of anyone who was named more appropriately. Ruth was indeed a woman of valor whose warmth and wisdom enriched all who knew her. As she wrote in her memoir, Ruth's father gave her a final blessing when they were in concentration camp. But it has also been our family and our many, many friends who were richly blessed by Ruth's long and meaningful life. Rest well and in peace. It is hard to imagine anyone who deserves it more. Okay, I'm listening.
Joel, thank you. Right. Needless to say, our family is very humbled by everyone's presence here today. As you can see, Mom had quite an array of friends. And there were a lot of people that always helped Mom without asking ever to do so. And we thank you for those times, because it certainly helped us. Her legacy and our presence told a lot of people, the Nazis and all hateful people, we won. She beat you, and she lived that every day. Tried to make everybody a better person, and tried to always tell us to do the right thing. And Mom, we love you. We love you very much, and we'll miss you.
Obviously, this is not an easy act to follow. I'm very proud of our family and how they are memorializing my mother, our mother. And on behalf of our entire family, thank you for honoring Mom in such a special way by your presence. I've dreaded this day forever, and I knew I could not come up with the right words. So I turned to the Beatles, Paul McCartney and John Lennon, who wrote, in my opinion, the most famous lyric ever written in music. And so I quote, "And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make." In Mom's case, I struggled with this and realized this did not apply to her. She gave so much more than she was so unselfishly took. We can take comfort in that, keeping her memory alive in our actions, thoughts, and prayers. We can pay back a small portion of the love she gave us all. Mom, I love you, and we'll miss you. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite the family to rise for the memorial prayer.
Rachamim, Shachein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Harakia, רחל בת יעקב וגיטרה, שהלכה לעולמה. בעל הרחמים, יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ביצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על בהשכבה. ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Ruth, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance, and may she rest in peace. Let us together say, Amen.
We'll remain standing for the mourners' Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ba'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shmei d'kudsha b'riachu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. The family will be joining us for Shiva and a Shiva meal in the Cultural Center right up through these doors on the side, immediately following. I'd like to invite all the guests to kind of go out first, and if you want to form two lines heading up towards the Cultural Center to offer them words of comfort as they pass through, please feel free to do so at that time.